All right, it's Debbie Potts, and I am not showing my video because I look silly, but I'll put my video up for a second. I've got my hat on, and I'm recording in my glass house fitness room slash office slash podcast space, and there's windows all around, so the sun's always shining in, so I have to have my hat on. And it is warm outside here in North San Diego, and I wanted to record the next part of my series on VO2 max, longevity, metabolic health, and how do we test and not guess if we are healthy from the inside out, starting with the conversation today on measuring your VO2 max. You can find a university exercise science lab near you or look up someone with PNOE, P-N-O-E, and I offer that North San Diego, if you want to come out here, or I can go 2 places, but you can find someone. I think they're getting to be more popular. So, how do you measure your VO2 max? We've been talking about why. I always question the fixation on the number VO2 max. Yes, it's a sign of longevity, but it is a great goal to get improvements. So you need to know your baseline. Where are you right now on your longevity project, your outlive project, or slowing the aging process down as myself? So we can use PNOE, a resting metabolism test, and the exercise test, also called active metabolism testing. This is a comprehensive assessment, especially if you combine it with blood chemistry markers, other functional lab tests, but for sure, metabolic health markers, and put that together with nutritional therapy assessment, reviewing what you're doing now, how you're training and fueling. And you don't have to be an athlete. I think what I'm trying to get this information out there for is that doing a VO2 max test is very unappealing to most people. And I want to make it appealing to those who are just health optimizers, to those who want to know how they should exercise each day, each week, each month to improve their health, how to get the minimal effective dose from your workout by getting more of a personalized approach based on evaluating where you are now, where are your areas of opportunity, where are you training in too much of and not little or not enough of, and then are you doing resistance training? How often? How much weight? Are you going heavy or going light? Are you doing mobility? Are you doing recovery days? We need to look at the whole picture because VO2 max is just one piece of the puzzle. I keep saying it's a holistic approach. I call it the holistic method when I coach people looking at the whole picture. So we want to look at this VO2 max test as a piece of the puzzle, but I don't want people to think it's just for extreme athletes. It is not. I think it is even more beneficial for those who are not exercising and they're intimidated of how to exercise, how to pace themselves, what to do. So we want to test and not guess for you what's best for you. Okay, with that, let me find my cursor, change my slides. So going back to the why we keep hearing about longevity, VO2 max longevity is the key to unlocking your full potential, learning how to train smarter, and getting a tailored approach to your body's unique needs. Everyone knows the power of breath analysis, believing that biology, not psychology, defines success. This is from PNOE, so maybe not everyone knows the power of breath analysis, but if you do believe in the power of breath analysis, it's about your biology, not psychology. So interesting to look at that. But we want to look at this VO2 max or metabolism testing or metabolic testing that we can unlock the secrets to optimizing your nutrition and training for your specific metabolism. VO2 max is a maximum amount of oxygen your body can absorb and utilize during exercise. It serves as the strongest predictor of your athletic performance and improvement. So by understanding your VO2 max, you have a clear measure of your current aerobic capacity and endurance potential. So this knowledge that you can gain more tools in your toolbox allows you and a coach to tailor your training program to improve your oxygen uptake, enhancing performance and endurance. Now, maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you just want to look good and feel good and move well as you age. That will help you as well if we do this test. So, PNOE, the word means breath. So, the company I use, the testing, it's a portable kit that measures cardiorespiratory and your metabolic analysis. A two-part breath test. We do the resting and the exercise test. So, we're measuring the vital functions our body runs to use oxygen, keep us alive, and helps us do a test. And then you get a great report afterwards. So we're measuring your heart, lungs, cells, blood circulation, metabolism, how they work all together, but individually. So we can identify what are your limiters. I like to say areas of opportunity. Where are you doing a lot of great things? You're doing well, but what are some things that are holding you back from being your best self? Again, you do not need to be an athlete. It's just how you can be healthy and improve the aging process, improve your metabolic health. So we can test and get your biological age marker with this test is different than the genetic ones and the other tests I've been talking about on my podcast. Lung fitness, heart fitness, recovery, fat burn, metabolism. When we do the resting test, we'll get your heart rate variability score measuring your low frequency and high frequency. So we get a score for that. So we get different scores in the resting test and a report, and then we do the exercise test, get a little bit different report and put it all together. What I do like to look at for people figuring out their fat burn, their calories, where they're coming from when you are at rest, that can help us look at metabolic health. Are you a fat burner when you're lying still, or are you a carbohydrate burner? And you'd be surprised. Some people that are really fit athletes may be more of a carb burner, but we want to look at metabolic flexibility. So we went over that in the previous video. What I can see when I'm measuring your oxygen consumption, what you're breathing in and what you're exhaling, the ratio of the two is called the respiratory quotient. This is RER is another word, respiratory exchange ratio. The ratio of the two can give us this amount of fat to carbohydrates you're burning. So we'll go into that a little bit more, but VO2 is a volume of carbon dioxide. VO2 is a volume of oxygen consumed. So the RER gives us a score of 0.7 to 1.0, and that correlates with 0.7 more fat, 0.85 is around combination, and then 1.0 higher carbohydrates. So we get this test seeing where we are burning fat at rest. And when we're doing the exercise test, I can track where your peak fat burning is, where you're burning the most calories, the most fat calories, and where the carbohydrates take over. So VO2 max research, what do we know? Well, again, just to review for the 10th time here, VO2 max is, as you know, the maximum rate of oxygen you can consume during intense exercise. This is a reflection of your body's ability to transport oxygen from the atmosphere to the working muscles and utilize it for energy production. So we express the VO2 max in milliliters per kilogram per minute. And this is why it's so talked about for all-cause mortality, for longevity markers. We want to look at cardiovascular aerobic fitness because a higher VO2 max value indicates better aerobic capacity, endurance, that all these body systems are working. And VO2 max is a great number to look at. So again, you can see how it's a combination of how well your oxygen chain works, a combination of the three systems where most conditions likely kill you from as we get older or any age, but death-related causes we can improve by looking at this VO2 max number and working on improving it, as well as I think muscular health, but your lungs, your heart, and your cells, we're looking at that. This is why I think VO2 max is important, but I think muscle strength is just as important because we're not measuring muscle health. But Obviously, if you have a higher VO2 max, you're going to have good muscular endurance. And the test itself, we can do in a bike or a treadmill or row or anything that we can increase resistance each minute or 2 minutes, depending on the protocol. It could be the incline going up or the speed going up, the resistance on a bike, the watts. So if we have a lower VO2 max, that's a good area of opportunity. How do we find out your biological age? On the Pinoe test, they use an algorithm that they some reason will not share with me. Is a VO2 max, your fat burn efficiency, and metabolic rate. So the combination of these three markers that we identify in the test can give us an estimated amount of a number for your biological age based on these three markers in the test. So American Heart Association, the cardiorespiratory fitness VO2 max is one of the best predictors, they say, for how long and how well you live. So having a higher fat burning efficiency is equivalent to high cellular fitness, essential for preventing metabolic diseases as weight gain that we talked about metabolic health earlier. Now, high metabolic rate is crucial for long-term health and is the most effective shield against weight gain. The number one driver behind these three most common causes of death is lung, heart, and metabolic diseases. So VO2 max can help predict your health. But think of this, if we combine this with your lab test, your functional lab test, and look at your genetics, so we can help personalize a program for you. So review VO2, volume of VO2 is your stroke volume times heart rate. Stroke volume is the volume of blood your heart is moving with each stroke. Heart rate is obviously heart rate, HR. And we can go into all those. But if you want to geek out, you can dive into those definitions on Pinoe website. So why is this important for longevity? We've went over that, but just to show you the kind of the new, so since 2016, American Heart Association, which I think this one might be right, but their recommendations are always maybe a little questionable. But I would say this is a great gold standard indicator of biological age. So the power of your oxygen consumption for your overall health. Now we look at your calories, your RER, carbs to fat. We look at all that testing. So the higher VO2 max is linked to better cardiovascular health, including the lower blood pressure, improved lipid profiles, reduced risk of cardiovascular diseases, heart attack, and stroke. So regular aerobic exercise can improve VO2 max, strengthens the heart muscles, and enhances blood vessel function and reduces inflammation, all of which contribute to longevity. So why is it so hard to get people to exercise? You read that, go, oh, I can just do that. But it doesn't come in a pill. It's not a magic drink I can just take and look at my biological age. I went down 5 years or 6 years, whatever it might be for you, by improving your VO2 max. So we have to work at it. That's why I think it's so challenging. You can't just do this without moving off the sofa. So VO2 max is critical metric. We know that is an indication of how well your body can use exercise or use oxygen during exercise. We know that. Health span, lifespan, and brain health. So how can you improve it? So Bradley Holmer, I just listened to on this podcast, new person I haven't heard before, but specializes in this just out of his grad school and has a new book out that I need to read. It's an ebook, which is challenging for me to read an ebook. But regular exercise activities that enhance VO2 max can positively affect heart health, brain function, longevity. So we can improve this VO2 max. We'll talk about how with HIIT training and steady state activities into your program. So going into these slides we did in the previous video, but just how important it is to have more functional capacity as you age. Another test or VO2 max versus age, how important it is. Another chart we went over in the previous video. Again, all these we went over, but risk reduction over 10 years. So how do you improve your VO2 max? Well, first of all, is higher better. So regular exercise can increase VO2 max. So how high do we need to go? So you can look at different charts. We can look at men versus women, who's got the best numbers, what is optimal. We don't want to be normal. We want to be optimal, right? So where is the ideal number in your age group, in your gender? So those are different charts you can find. Now, when we do metabolism testing, when I put the face mask on, you hook you up, heart rate monitor on, I'm looking at your exercise tests, raw data. And I need to get a shot of that in this presentation. But zone 2, we identify where your peak fat burning is and where your metabolic crossover point is. So the last section of these slides, I have how to find your zones and how do we personalize this. So you don't know your zone 2 unless you test, or if you cannot get testing. For years, we've talked about to fill Maffetone's 180 formula. So check that out. That would be your max aerobic function heart rate, similar to zone 2, where you're improving your metabolism to burn more fat. So you're getting more mitochondria. I'm working on breaking down fat. Now, zone 4 and 5 are where you increase your VO2 max. How do you know what these zones are is what we do in the metabolism testing. How much resistance training and cardio do you need to do? Well, that's going to be a combination of what I find out when you do your resting metabolism test. Seeing where your resting metabolism is based on comparison to your age, gender, height, weight. And then looking at your fitness test results, and we can identify, do you need to do a little more time in the gym and less cardio? Do you need to do less zone 2 and more sprint intervals? Or do you need to do more zone 2 and maybe just 1 day a week do this type of workout? So it depends. So here's some workouts I found online. You hear a lot with Dr. Rhonda Patrick and Peter Attia and Huberman talking about these VO2 max workouts. So I started to research some of them, some research where they came from, this Norwegian 4x4 workout. And I always like to look at, okay, where do these workouts come from? What this research says? Who were they done on? What age group? What gender? How long were they doing the tests? How did they figure out their intensity? And did they retest them and all that? So we want to know the details of a test before we go, okay, that's it. And we also want to look at a meta-analysis to see if this is repeated. So we've got research on the 4x4 Norwegian workout, the Tabata you've heard about, fartlek training's been around. Research on the 4x4 you can look up on PubMed. And then HIIT research, I was trying to find comparison of a sprint interval versus high intensity interval training versus periodized interval training. So I need to go back and read the results in those reports, but there's lots of info on there. Conclusion, I always just go down to that. Increases the VO2 max in response to different HIIT programs, improved oxygen delivery. So different ones. That this test was 39 active women and female, mean age, VO2 max. This is 22.9 plus minus 5.4 years, 39.6 plus or minus 5.6 was their VO2 max, performed HIIT, and 32 men and women were in non-exercise control groups. So kind of can spend a little bit too much time into that, but it's good to know what is everyone talking about this 4x4 Norwegian workout for. So we've got pyramid intervals, 1 minute, 45 seconds, then you do a minute and then 90 seconds, and then back down the pyramid. So you go 90 seconds, comes down to 1 minute to 45 seconds. Steady state endurance training, maybe that's in zone 2, holding that, and hill repeats. Now, that's a good point. I just thought of, do you have a fitness level, a base? Should you start adding in these VO2 max workouts when you haven't done anything? Do we need to build a base, doing some zone 1 and 2 workouts, then build up to this? Or maybe you just start with zone 2, then maybe add in some of these pickups at the end. But that's a good conversation to have with your coach. So should we do HIIT versus sit? Stacy Sims talks more for females, pre-post menopause, more sprint interval training. So I was trying to dive into that. And then looking at HIT, systemic review, cluster analysis, 103 studies of high intensity interval training. So that's kind of what I wanted to find. Is this how we should train? The age group 20 to 44 years HIT long running reported greater improvement than the CRF, which is cardiorespiratory fitness, then HIT short cycling. So you have to just kind of dive into these rabbit holes, but looking at the research. So what works for you might be different for someone else than if you're a man versus a woman at different ages. I'm always looking at that. So what do these studies say that as women age, what should we do a little differently? So this says highly fit men and women showed no difference in response from rest to peak exercise, suggesting no apparent sex differences contributing to reduced gas exchange in women. Mismatched. So you can go into all this research if you want. Okay, so let's finish up fuel sources. As we are training, we're in different fuel sources. So it's kind of working the other direction. So if we start on this right side, we know zone 1, zone 2, we're over here. And as we're in this zone, walking or easy run, for some people might be still a fast walk, that we're able to go longer. So this is zone 2, is that long sustained distance. When I'm able to go at intensity slow enough that I can keep up with breaking down fat to create ATP for energy. Oxidative phosphorylation is what it's called. Now, as I go a little higher intensity, I start to get a combination of glycolysis using glycogen, glucose, creating pyruvate, ATP is produced. So you're still burning some fat, and then we go into burning more carbohydrates. Now, as you get faster, going all out, as we get into zone 5, you're up here in the creatine phosphate energy system. And then this high power sprint weightlifting 100-meter sprint is over here. So you can see this change in fuel sources, but they all kind of overlap. So my mentor, Daniel Crumback, says it's not that you're aerobic, anaerobic, burning one or the other. They kind of flow one into the other. So there's an overlapping. They can see beta oxidation is the breaking down of fatty acids into acetyl-CoA, into the Krebs cycle. And this NADs, where you look at this other picture I had, how often it is used in the Krebs cycle and all the cofactors. So respiratory exchange ratio, I talked about, where we looked at how much fat carbohydrate we're burning, and then looking at the different fuel sources at different intensity and how that can change with how we train, our stress levels, what we're eating. And then we have our Krebs cycle here. So I found this online, but you can see how confusing Krebs cycle, pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, citrate. There's a lot going on. That's why Krebs cycle is so confusing. I keep saying what NAD. And B vitamins are often, you look at other methylation charts, but NADH to NAD. So that's a podcast I was trying to do on NAD. So fat oxidation is a relatively slow process compared to glycolysis, and is the primary energy source during low to moderate intensity exercise, prolonged endurance activity, and rest. So it provides a steady and sustained energy source of energy if you're going longer than 30 minutes. So when we are using fats, triglycerides, as I just went over, the fatty acids are broken down, triglycerides stored in adipose tissue, and then they're transported to the muscle cells, where they undergo beta oxidation to produce acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA enters that Krebs cycle I just showed you, and oxidative phosphorylation to generate ATP. This is my rabbit holes I go down to. It's too many times. Each molecule of fatty acids can produce a much larger amount of ATP compared to glucose, yielding around 129 ATP molecules per 16 carbon fatty acid molecule. So think 80 or 129 molecules, a lot more than we get from carbohydrates. So carbohydrates come from food we eat and stored in our muscle and liver glycogen, but we're moving from our muscle. They're Glucose, glycogen is the stored form. So carbohydrates, the body's preferred fuel source for high intensity exercise. Zone 1, 2's preferred source is fats. So does it mean carbs are bad, that you need to stay in zone 2? We'll go into that as we dive down these metabolism tests. Now, glucose is readily available in the bloodstream while glycogen is stored in the muscles and liver. Glucose and glycogen are metabolized through glycolysis to produce pyruvate, which can enter the Krebs cycle and oxidative phosphorylation pathways into aerobic metabolism. So this generates ATP, the energy currency of cells. In glycolysis, each molecule of glucose can produce a net gain of 2 ATP molecules, so a little different than fat oxidation. Aerobic glycolysis, a little bit more information. Glucose, pyruvate is transported into the mitochondria. So, oops, already talked about that. Oxidative phosphorylation, you don't need to know that. Anaerobic glycolysis. So I wanted to put this in here because anaerobic glycolysis is what we used to say aerobic, anaerobic, but is producing ATP without oxidative metabolism, absence of oxygen. When oxygen availability is limited, so when we're doing this test, we can see when your oxygen becomes less available to keep up with the higher intensity exercise. So the energy demands exceed your oxygen supply. Glucose is metabolized through glycolysis to produce pyruvate. So instead of entering mitochondria for oxidation, pyruvate is converted to lactate in the cytoplasm, generating ATP in the process. Anaerobic glycolysis is the primary energy source. Short duration, high intensity is sprinting weightlifting, where the energy demands exceed oxygen availability. So it's a rapid but limited source of energy associated with production of lactate. So you hear about lactic acid creates a burn, but it's more phosphorus that creates a burn, the acid, and not lactate is used as a fuel. So I want to go into that, another rabbit hole. So lactate is produced by the byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis, breaking down of glucose without oxygen, as we went over. During high intensity, this is your quick energy used for fuel. So the metabolism of lactate does not directly generate ATP, but rather helps maintain energy balance to support continued exercise performance. Lactate is not considered a metabolic waste, but rather a valuable source of energy that can be used by the muscles and other tissues. So also, I just put this slide in because remember, women that are cycling, you want to make sure you're doing a metabolic test at the right time of your cycle. Okay, so personalization, we want to look at the test results, what your zones are. So we create your zones based on your peak fat burning max, where your metabolic crossover point is, where the breathing frequencies around 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 and above. So it can see where your fat burning efficiency is, figure out your zones. Then we can personalize where your zones are. So my mentor, Daniel, taught us that each person switches their sources of fuel different rates based upon their systems to provide energy at each intensity level, where they're more efficient in developing ATP in their zone 2, where others might be better at different higher zones. So we'll be able to see where you're needing more work in. And so we can see what recovery zone 2 is your long sustained distance. Zone 3 is more known as heart fitness area. Zone 4, increase fatigue threshold, increase anaerobic threshold, VO2 max. And then zone 5, VO2 max, fat burning efficiency, mitochondria capacity, and cellular health, increases fatigue threshold. So we want to personalize this training program, figure out your nutrition, your breath work, your mobility, strength training, zone 2, zone 4, 5. And if you have heart conditions, maybe we're adding in some zone 3. Finding your peak fat burning in your zone 2, metabolic crossover points are top of your zone 2. And then we figure out what those zones are, and then we can figure out your speed work. So tempo, cardio is first. That's your zone 2. Tempo is your zone 3. Long intervals are zone 3, 4. Medium, long intervals, zone 4. And then short interval training, zone 5. So you can see the importance part that I have to teach people, especially when I listen to all this social media stuff on this VO2 max workouts, that you're up here, say 30 to 90 seconds, zone 4. Zone 3, 4 is 5 to 10 minutes. You come down to this zone 1, it's 2-to-1 ratio, 1-to-1 ratio, 1-to-2 ratio. So if you're doing, say, the 4x4 Norwegian workout, what heart rate can I hold for 4 minutes? It might be this top of my zone 3, bottom of zone 4, it's 5 to 10 minutes. So if you're trying to lose fat weight, we can figure out your resting metabolism rate, figure out what your workout should be. Maybe look at some other lifestyle habits. Stress will impact that. So we can personalize that data, maybe CGM. Performance goals, we can help figure out, hey, with your race coming up, let's get more specific in how you train and how you fuel in and around that workout. Longevity goals. This is what I think we should market towards people instead of just athletes, thinking VO2 max is just for athletes. But we keep hearing about longevity VO2 max, but not to scare people. I don't need to know your VO2 max, especially if you don't exercise. Maybe it scares you to go to your max effort. So let's just start identifying your zone 2. Let's figure out RPE, different heart rates, and figure out where your peak fat burning is. I don't maybe need to take you up to your maximum, but maybe if you're out of shape, that will happen pretty fast. And it's also perceived exertion level, say 1 to 10, we get you up to 10 if you're ready for that. But that's going to be baseline data that you need to know to figure out how to get the most out of your workouts. So lots of information. If you want to know more, head to wpotts.net, and you can follow my podcast on the YouTube channel, Be Fit and Healthy from the Inside Out. And I hope you join me on this journey to improve the aging process and live simply ageless. All right. Thank you. See you next time.